Ko tēnā koutou katoa e rau rangatira mā, na mihi nui ki a koutou katoa. He kai whakahaere ahau o te Kaunihera Wāhine o Aoteaora, ko Suzanne Manning toka wingwa. No mai, hari mai ki tēnei huhuinga. No reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Welcome to the Gender Attitude Survey launch for 2023. We are very pleased to host you all here. I would like to start us with a karakia before I tell you about how we're going to work the launch today. Kia hora te mareno, kia whakapapa pounamu te moana. Hei huarahi mā tātou I te rangi nei, araha atu, araha mai, tātou I a tātou katoa. And that means, may peace be widespread, may the sea be like greenstone, a pathway for all of us this day. Let us show respect for each other, for one another. Kia ora. So today, I will give you a brief background on what the Gender Attitude Survey is, although I do hope that everybody here is aware and you're on the edge of your seat waiting for this year's results. We'll go back. Just leave that. Thanks, Brian. Then we will invite the Minister for Women, the Honourable Jan Tinetti, to officially launch the survey. We will have Emanuel Kalafatelis, the Managing Director of Research New Zealand, present the results of this year's survey. Then we will have a comment on the survey results and their implications from Saunoamaali'i, Dr. Karanina Sumeo. Apologies, I'm trying. And then we will open the floor for questions and answers. Now, you will notice in the webinar that in your toolbar, you have a Q&A, the multiple little speech bubbles. You may put your question and answer questions in that at any time during our presentations, and we will answer those when we come to the discussion at the end. We do want to finish within the hour. We know that you are all very busy, and we thank you for taking time out of your day to do this. So just as a brief background to the survey, National Council of Women of New Zealand have been advocating for women's rights and gender equality for a long time. But just under 10 years ago, we decided we needed to kickstart a bit. We needed to start measuring our progress towards gender equality, because how else can we, along with all the other gender equality advocates, know that we're being effective? So this led to our award-winning Gender Attitude Survey carried out with our partners Research New Zealand, which has given us a snapshot of New Zealand's knowledge of and attitudes towards gender equality. This comprehensive ongoing survey is repeated biennially to allow us to measure shifts in attitude over time, with a nationally representative sample of around 1,250 New Zealanders each time we do the survey. So 2017 was the baseline. The next survey was in 2019. We asked the same questions. The results didn't show much change, even though we'd had global events like the hashtag #MeToo movement didn't seem to impact an awful lot. Then 2 years later, we had the 2021 Gender Attitude Survey, again, showing little change. So then finally we come to, or it's not final actually, but it's the latest in the series, is the 2023 Gender Attitude Surveys. So now to officially launch the results of the 2023 Gender Attitude Survey, I'd like to welcome Minister for Women, the Honourable Jan Tinetti. No mai, haere mai, Minister. And Rayanne can switch through.
He papa ki kau ana ngā tai, he tai wiwi, he tai wawa, he tai ki uta, he tai ki waho, ko tēnei te tai o te tangata. E tau nei ki konei aku nui, aku rahi, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you for your warm welcome and invitation to speak at the launch of the 2023 Gender Attitude Survey. Suzanne, I cannot believe that it has been 2 years. When you were saying that, I was thinking, wow, 2 years. Because I actually think this is a really, really important survey for women in this country. And I have to say right off the bat that as Minister for Women, I greatly appreciate the long-standing relationship that we've had with the New Zealand Council of Women of New Zealand for your ongoing commitment to improving the lives of women and girls in Aotearoa, New Zealand. But I think this survey, you alongside Research New Zealand, developing and putting this survey out there tells us a lot about what's going on in the country and tells us a lot about where we need to be looking at and heading. It raises some really important considerations and perspectives around the progress for women in Aotearoa. And I'm looking forward to hearing and being part of the meaningful conversations beyond today that will result in the findings, because a lot of what we've been doing in the last 2 years and the work that we've been progressing does come from the work that we find from the attitudes that New Zealanders hold in this space. It does help us understand and gain those important insights and attitudes on the views which directly impact on women, and it shines a really important spotlight on areas such as equality in the workforce, education, attitudes towards unpaid work, and family and sexual violence. The survey provides the Ministry for Women and me as Minister for Women with important information about our society's views on gender. This has positively influenced policy development, as I've said, over the past few years. The findings also support our thinking for future policy and initiatives to ensure that we continue to make progress for women. Now, I'm going to say that while some of the responses are encouraging, to me, when I had a look at this, it is really clear that we still have work to do to achieve gender equality. We need all genders to continue to work towards this goal. And I think from my perspective, it was only yesterday that I was having a conversation around this absolute aspect, around the fact, oh, we're already there. And I was able to say, no, we're not. We've still got a long way to go. The survey does highlight our collective vision, with 8 out of 10 people identifying that gender equality is a fundamental right. And that is a positive step forward, but it also means that 20% of respondents still don't agree. And this is something that we need to work together to change. I'm also really delighted this time that with the rise of social media, both in Aotearoa and across the world, the inclusion of new questions around online harassment is important and necessary. This is ongoing work, and I hear this conversation from people all the time around this need to understand what's going on in this space more. It's also encouraging to see that being caring is increasingly seen as important for all genders, particularly within the context of COVID and the weather-related events over the last couple of years. The Gender Attitudes Survey is a critical source of information which helps us to understand the current social climate in Aotearoa, New Zealand. These findings show us that we have already come so far, but it shows us that some attitudes towards women are changing for the better. But despite the progress, we know that there is more to do. We know that we're not there yet and acknowledge that progress has not been equitable for all women. Women have a right to equal participation and play a critical role in the social, economic and political landscapes of Aotearoa, New Zealand. We will reach gender equality when people of all genders have equal rights, responsibilities and opportunities. Gender equality is a human right which benefits everyone. Can I say once again, thank you to National Council of Women of New Zealand and Research New Zealand for your incredible work to support the women and girls of Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm delighted to launch this year's survey, and I look forward to hearing today's discussions and continuing to strive for long-lasting social change to make Aotearoa, New Zealand a better place together. Ngā mihi nui.
Yeah. Kia ora for that, Minister. That is stirring words. And you're right, it's a continuing journey. We have got a long way to go. So we are pleased to have you with us here for as long as you can make it. I realise with your schedule that you will have to leave early, but thank you very much for being here for this part. We will now move to actually telling you all about the results of this year's survey. And for that, we're going to invite the Managing Director of Research New Zealand, Emanuel Kalafatelis, to talk to us about it. Sorry, I'm thinking the next thing I've got to share my screen so that we can see what it is there. And okay, kia ora, Emanuel.
Kia ora, Suzanne. Kia ora, koutou. Ko Emanuel Kalafatelis, toko ingoa. I've got a bit of a cold, so I apologise for that, but I'll try and keep hydrated to help with that. I'm pleased that that in your introduction, Suzanne, you talked about the history of this particular survey. It's unbelievable that it's almost 10 years old, and this is the 4th iteration of the survey. I remember it was actually in 2015 when we started talking to National Council of Women about this survey that, we never thought that, we'd be where we are today. But I just want to add to the history by saying that when we were developing the survey, we looked overseas to see if there was anything comparable that we could actually piggyback on. The EU does do a number of gender attitude surveys, but we felt in the end that it wasn't particularly useful for our purposes, and we decided to develop our own survey. Here we are, as I say, almost 10 years down the track, and we now have other jurisdictions, other countries in the world asking us to borrow our survey instrument, which I think is a great accomplishment. As far as this year's survey results are concerned, we have quite a number of resources. There is this presentation. There is actually a significant written report which provides detailed information for every single question in the survey. There's also an online e-report, which is effectively a website which can be used to even mine the information. So, as I say, we have at least 3 resources which I'm sure are going to be used in the next year or so. The presentation that I give today is obviously going to focus on the high-level results because we just simply don't have the time to go through everything. I will, as I'm going through the results, draw out differences by gender, but I just want you to also know that the results have also been examined by age as well as ethnicity. We just simply don't have the time to go through any of the differences in relation to those two today. So if we could just move on to the first slide, thank you. I think we've said all of this, so we can move on to the next one. Now, across these 2 slides, we're presenting here the top, if you like, the top 10 results of this year's survey. And I'm pleased to hear the Minister say that, 80-odd% of New Zealanders think that gender equality is a fundamental right. But actually, if you look at that from a slightly different perspective, you have to ask yourself, why is it that 20% don't think that? And you'll see in a moment that that's a feeling that is shared by both males as well as females. Notwithstanding that, we've got many people thinking we're doing well in achieving gender equality. And there have been some quite significant increases in opinion between this year's survey and the previous survey in 21. Having said that, we've got almost 1 in every 2 people saying, well, actually, gender equality has for the most part been achieved. And the other thing is that we're even noticing an increase, as you can see, on the situation 2 surveys ago, back in 2019. And for me, one of the unfortunate results is this next one here, the fourth one. 1 in every 5 people, 22%, think that gender equality has gone too far in Aoteaora, New Zealand. And against all of that, we've got a situation where 1 in every 2 people think that either no group in Aotearoa, New Zealand is disadvantaged by gender inequality, or they don't know which groups are when you actually pose that question to them. So, you can quickly do the sum, just as I have. That's 44%, almost 1 in every 2 thinking that. If we can move to the next slide. You'll see what I mean by the sixth result here in a moment when I show you some slides. But there's also a general opinion that when we achieve gender equality, there's going to be a reduction in some of our social problems. And that's a view held by men especially. However, I have to say that rape myths persist, and you'll see in a moment again what I mean by that. For the last little while, this survey has, in addition to issues around gender equality, has also looked at issues around gender diversity. And the last 2 slides you can see here are focused on the results for that. I'll wait until I show you some of the detail before I expand on those 2 results there. Thank you. So how well are we doing in terms of achieving gender equality? There are a number of what I call anchor questions in the survey, and this is one of the anchor questions where we ask people on a scale of agreement to tell us whether they think that gender equality is a fundamental right. And we're presenting here the results for this year. In the graph, you can see overall it's 81% agree with that. Clearly, there's a 20% gap before we get to 100%. And the thing is that we've had this result for at least the last 3 surveys. So we haven't actually been able to move this result at all in the last six to 8 years. The other thing I'd like to point out about this is that there's the level of agreement is the same for both males and females. And I just want you to park that in the back of your head as we go through the remainder of the results. Thank you. So if we look at our society and we ask our respondents how well we're doing in terms of achieving gender equality in various parts of our society, and specifically, are we doing well? What we've done in this slide here is presented you with the results for this year against the results for 2019. And you've obviously been able to work out that they're in descending order. A couple of things I'd like to say about this slide. In terms of doing well, okay, we're doing well in terms of how well we're achieving gender equality in Parliament. But, really, at the end of the day, we've only got around 50 to 60% of people agreeing with that. And if you drop down to the bottom of the slide here, you can see that overall we've got significantly less in relation to the armed forces and in senior management. In fact, there's they're very low, around a third. So we move to the next slide. What we've done here is just focused our attention on the this year's results, 2023. The blue column, the light blue column, shows you what the overall result is. But what we've done here to the left is shown you the differences between males and females. There's quite a bit of detail here, but I think really what I want you to do is just see that there are some pretty significant differences between what males think and what females think. So even in terms of the best result there, so to speak, for in Parliament. 70% of males think that we're doing well in terms of that, doing well, as opposed to 50% of females. And you can see that we've got that pattern repeated in terms of the other areas as well. So on to the next slide. Thank you. Another anchor question, if you like, in the survey is the extent to which people believe that we've already achieved gender equality. And so again, if we focus on this year's results, 48% of New Zealanders think that that's actually the case, 1 in every 2. And if we focus our attention on the differences between males and females, you'll remember before there was hardly any difference in terms of the previous anchor question about gender equality being a fundamental right. Here we have a very large difference between males and females. But even amongst the females, we've got 40% saying to us that gender equality has, for the most part, already been achieved. Another anchor question is this one here, about whether, in fact, gender equality in Aoteaora, New Zealand has gone too far. Overall, 1 in every 5, 22%, in this year's survey think that's the case. Again, we've got a significant difference there between males and females. Now, so we've got the results of those anchor questions, and so clearly there are some people who think that we haven't achieved gender equality yet, although as I've shown you already, there are many people who think we have, and in fact have gone too far. But if we focus our attention on who in particular we think is being disadvantaged by gender inequality, I should say, you can see from this slide here that overall 39% of New Zealanders think that women generally are disadvantaged by gender inequality. That compares with 12%, if you go down a bit, with men generally. So that's what, a ratio of 3 to 1, basically thinking that women generally are disadvantaged by gender inequality. And again, there are some quite significant differences by the genders. So female respondents in particular are almost twice as likely to believe that women generally are disadvantaged by gender inequality compared to men, 50 to 27%. And the other thing I want to really point out to you before we move on from this slide are the bottom 2 results. 17% of us think that no group in Aoteaora, New Zealand, is disadvantaged by gender inequality. And when you put people to the test, we've got, as you can see there, 27% thinking, well, not knowing, who in fact or which groups in the population are disadvantaged. Thank you. So against that background, let's look at what people's opinions are with respect to what Aoteaora New Zealand would look like if we did in fact achieve gender equality. So this slide here is looking at what achieving gender equality would look like in society, and particularly with respect to employment and what happens in the home. So we've got some pretty positive results there. 86% believing that there would be equal sharing of childcare responsibilities between men and women. A similar proportion, 84%, thinking that in the household there would be the equal sharing of chores between men and women. Women in employment would receive the same pay as men at 80%. But if you recall, the previous one of the previous slides showed you that we weren't doing particularly well in terms of the employment situation, particularly in terms of senior management with respect to the employment environment. And I say that particularly with respect to the last result there at 77% in terms of improved job and career opportunities. Again, some slight differences between males and females, with females in particular having a more positive view on what Aoteaora New Zealand would look like when we achieve gender equality. This is, if you like, the continuation of the slide, of the previous slide. What we're doing here is just basically moving down our list in a descending order. So again, what I want to do is just highlight some of the results which stand out to me in particular, and I just want to show you, especially the results for the last two there. 54% believe that if we achieve gender equality, there would be less pressure on women to have a particular body shape. So you've got to ask yourself, well, what are the other 46% thinking? Similarly, we've got a result there of 53% in terms of there being less pressure on women to be physically attractive. So again, you've got to ask yourself, what are the other 47% thinking with respect to that? Thank you. I mentioned before one of the key results, if we achieve gender equality, would be a reduction in some of our social problems. And the slide here illustrates that. In particular, there'd be less gender stereotyping in the media. 57% agree with that. Reduction in the rates of domestic violence, 47%. Reduction in the rates of sexual violence at 45%, and so on and so forth. Again, you've got to ask yourself, what are the other people thinking that don't see it that way? And again, I just want to highlight some of the differences that are apparent, particularly between the genders, especially in relation to views about the reduction in the rates of domestic violence and also sexual violence, with males describing Aotearoa, a gender equality Aotearoa in those terms, much less than females. Thank you. And again, against all of that background, we've still got some rape myths persisting. So a third of us believe that false rape accusations are still common. Rape happens when a man's sex drive is out of control, 30% believing that, and so on and so forth. And again, we've got some differences in terms of what males and females think, with males, for example, in particular, thinking that false rape accusations are quite common. Thank you. I mentioned before that for the last 3 survey iterations, we've been including questions about gender diversity, and I just want to show you here a couple of results. This looks like a very busy graph, and it is, and I apologise for that, but what we're doing is comparing whether people would feel comfortable with sexually diverse people in certain environments. And what we're doing here on the left of the graph is comparing their comfort levels, if you like, with gay and bisexual men compared with lesbian and bisexual women on the right. I think what you can see if you look at the results, that we've got some pretty positive results overall. You know, most of them are in the 70s, if not more. But again, you can see that female and males have different views or comfort levels, if you like, in these situations. And you can see that, for example, in terms of being part of your immediate family, we've got 82% of females being comfortable with that, as opposed to 70% of men with respect to gay and bisexual men, and we've got a similar result or difference happening in terms of lesbian and bisexual women. And if we move on to the next slide, what we're looking at here is a similar presentation, graphical presentation, but we're comparing trans men with trans women. The levels of comfort are not as high, so to speak, as we saw previously, but again, we're seeing the same differences, if not more pronounced, with respect to females and males. So, thank you. That's that. If we go to the next slide, that's me. That's all I'd like to say from in terms of this year's results today. But as I say, there's a significant written report. There's also this online e-reporting tool. But what I'd like to end by saying is just reiterating the fact that we've got a stubborn 20% of the population continuing to disagree that gender equality is a fundamental right. We've got 1 in every 2 thinking that gender equality has, for the most part, been achieved. We have twice as many males thinking that we've gone too far with gender equality compared with females. And notwithstanding this, we've got females generally being identified as the population group most frequently as being disadvantaged by gender inequality. Plus, we've got some, as you saw, some pretty significant differences between males and females. So, as the Minister said, and as Suzanne said, we've got miles to go before we've got a gender equality Aoteaora in New Zealand. Thank you.
Kia ora, Emanuel, thank you very much for that. Let me stop sharing. It's been a pleasure to work with you on this project, along with our funding partners, the Ministry for Women. I note that the Minister has had to leave us for another appointment. We're pleased that she could fit us into her busy schedule. I've also noticed that people are starting to put questions in the Q&A, which is great. Do keep that up, because I'm sure there's a lot of things that are going to occur to you as we go into the discussion. And with our next commentary, I'm sure it will highlight more thoughts for you, more questions, so do put them in the chat. I would now like to invite, a pleasure to have one of our strongest advocates for gender equality sharing the screen with us today, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commissioner, Saunoamaali'i, Dr. Karanina Sumeo. And thank you very much for being here with us. And we would love to hear your perspective on the results that have just been shared.
Tēnā koutou, talawhalawa, to our sisters at Te Kaunihera, Wāhine, Aoteaora. Talawhalawa, Suzanne, thank you for giving me the opportunity to be part of today. And also fantastic work, Emanuel, to you and Research New Zealand. So I guess overall, we know we've got a lot of work to do. And I'm thinking, Suzanne, that obviously the Human Rights Commission needs to work a lot harder if we've still got 20% of the population who don't think gender equality is a fundamental right. So that's a real lesson. I was really interested, Emanuel, in that stat around people who thought gender equality had been achieved. Actually, only 40% of your female participants versus 57% of male participants supported that. So clearly the majority of women recognize that we've got so much to do. And I thought, that optimism by our brothers right through in terms we're looking at how for education or, senior roles going to women. I mean, they're very optimistic when clearly the lived experience of women says otherwise. I was particularly concerned in terms of the gender differences, in terms of progress of gender equality any areas of justice, only 31% of our female participants thought that we had made progress compared to 57% of male participants. If we look at welfare, only 33% of female participants versus 54% of male participants thought we had progressed in welfare. And so it goes on. So it's like we're living in two separate planets in the same country. So that was really, really useful, Emanuel. Those findings are really useful. And, you know, I was also interested in that stat around the groups that were seen. You know, you asked that question of participants of which groups do they think are disadvantaged by gender equality, which is an interesting question, because sometimes when I put things out on social media, I hear from people who essentially, but what about us? You've left us out. So I thought that was a useful question. And 40% of your sample either didn't know anyone was disadvantaged of it, or believe that no one was disadvantaged. So that's quite a concerning stat. That's a really huge stat. And I would be really interested in your gender and ethnic breakdown of your sample, because I think if we've reached a plateau in terms of the general population thinking, you know, this is a fundamental right, or we're doing well, then we need to now go, you know, below the averages to see how can we better target our advocacy, how can we better target our interventions, our social media, our voices. So I'll be really interested in that breakdown by age. You know, if I'll give an example, if you look at the issue of the issue you've got there of attitudes towards rape and sexual assault, those stats are so scary. We're in 2023, and you still got men who believe that those attitudes. It's so concerning from a woman's perspective, but also as a parent. You know, I have two daughters. It freaks me out that those attitudes are still there, and you know, that kind of aligns with women's response in terms of how we progress in justice. In the justice system, only 31% of women thought we'd made any progress. So, you know, your findings are basically affirming each other, and that's a very, very scary stat. So again, if we can see the breakdown in terms of those attitudes by age, by cultural identity or ethnicity, however you use it, that would really, really be helpful for all of our civil society groups, and certainly for policy people, in terms of making sure that our policies to improve the justice system or the health system or welfare are better targeted. So very, very helpful information there. Thank you for the question, the new question on online harm, because you know the world has changed dramatically since 2017, and I don't think that we're well prepared for it. Our laws were written in a time, you know, prior to COVID and so forth. So I'll be paying close attention to that particular stat in terms of, you know, our policy people paying attention to the gender survey, because they need to pay attention to the survey. It's a very scary result, but we need to go there. I was encouraged by what appears to be a call for women to be in places of decision making, like, you know, women in parliament, you know, women in senior management roles. That was a clear call out from the data. And I do believe that all the advocacy that the National Council of Women, Global Women, you know, Pacifica, you know, all our advocacy groups, in terms of demanding places for women to be at decision-making tables, I think all of that advocacy has contributed to today's result, the result that you brought. But clearly we need to do more. And we need to look at some of our younger cohorts, in terms of men and women, and those who identify in other genders. We need to get everyone involved. I was encouraged to see some focus of the study on our transgender brothers and sisters. Yeah, I thought one of the questions that might be interesting to consider is, would you be comfortable if a trans man or trans woman was your child's partner or something like that? I wonder if that might be an interesting question. But yeah, again, interesting response. If it was your doctor or your prime minister, I thought those are really interesting questions. In terms of there's a lot of stuff here that I will take up in the Human Rights Commission, for us to use. But the issue of consent, teaching consent in schools, I know it's been talked about for some time, but it's still not everybody supports it. But that has really jumped out to me to be so essential, to be teaching that at schools. When I look at those stats around sexual assault and rape and online harm, I think that's clearly an area that we can focus on as part of our women's advocacy. But I will stop there, Suzanne. But congratulations to you all for the amazing piece of work. Certainly for the Human Rights Commission, it's put up a mirror in front of me. Let's put it that way. of what we need to do better, and perhaps in a more targeted way. Because as I said, we've reached this sort of plateau. And now we need to really dig deep and be sort of specific in our approaches of certain communities. So, Whaftailava, Suzanne, and thank you, Emanuel.
Whaftailava, Commissioner, that was wonderful. And you know what was one of the most wonderful things for me is hearing that the survey is going to be useful. So that is absolutely what we were doing this for. And so for everybody who's out there in a policy space, not just the Human Rights Commission, this survey is for you too. The Research New Zealand have put the data into an e-tool, which is available on their website and on the National Council of Women, on the Gender Equal website. And you will be able to do some own queries about that, disaggregating by ethnicity and age and that sort of stuff. We also have more data available, and we are all open to working with anybody who wants to come with a query about, do we know this, do we know that, and what sort of data. We are more than happy to get some of the extra data as per required. As we are still building this up, and the good thing about the tool is data over a few years, and one of the things that it's not changing much. It actually, from a data point of view, it means that we can build up greater numbers. There are still some caveats on that. For example, the actual numbers of Māori and Pacific people are quite low still. So we are cautious about going, this is what Māori think, or this is what Pacifica think. And it is in our dream that we will actually do some separate research to dig deeper into that. So happy to come and talk with the Human Rights Commission about this sort of thing in the future. And we have, for example, asked people if they're comfortable with identifying their gender. And we have had some non-binary people answer the survey, but the numbers are so low that we are not reporting them. But over time, we will get there, I believe. Another couple of things I wanted to mention there. Karanina, you did actually talk to some of the things that the National Council of Women are actively working on at the moment, and this survey will be supporting that. For example, we've got our action hubs working on the online safety coalition with a number of other groups, and that is something I would like to say to you too, that you say what the Human Rights Commission needs to do better. I would say it's your leaders in the space, but it's not only up to you, it is a collective. So working together, we should be able to move this on. We will be soon releasing a small survey that we did, asking schools about what they are teaching around consent education as a basis for us to say, well, you know, maybe we should, what do we have to do to get this better taught in our schools? So these are things that we are very interested in progressing. And just a shout out there, if anybody does want to support this ongoing work, you can go and visit our website at National Council of Women and make a small donation. Everything will help us to continue this work. What I would like to do is turn to some of the answers now. Kerry, can you help me out with this one? And we'll...
Yep, there's some questions here about the way the data gets used. But first, did we have an equal response rate from both men and women?
Emanuel, I'll get you to answer that when you've got to go off mute.
What was that question again?
Did we have an equal response rate for both men and women?
Yes. Survey-wise, yes.
Yeah,
great. There's a question which is probably harder to answer around.
Bring it on. Bring it on. Come on.
The funding of the survey, and whether or not it will continue if the Ministry for Women does not.
The National Council of Women and Research New Zealand are committed to the survey. It will continue. If the Ministry for Women were not there, we would find it a lot more difficult, but it would not stop us. However, fancy getting rid of the Ministry for Women. If that was actually suggested, I would hope there would be such an uproar up and down the country that it could not happen. So I'm sticking with that one.
Okay, thanks, Suzanne. There's quite a few number.
Sorry, Kerry,
Emanuel.
can I just also add that from the get-go, 2017, this survey has been heavily subsidised by Research New Zealand. So I think that speaks to what Suzanne was saying about the fact that we'll continue to do it no matter what.
Yes, there's been a lot of support.
There's quite a number of questions here about the gender non-binary and gender diverse status of both the delivery of the survey and the people surveyed. So the questions in the survey and the people who were surveyed. And you touched on this a little bit, but maybe we need a slightly more robust answer.
Yeah, so the survey sample is based on a representative sample of New Zealanders, 18 years and over. So it's as if we've taken a cross-section of the New Zealand population, defined on the basis of age, gender, and region. We oversample Māori and Pacific people in order to be able to look at their results with a little bit more confidence. But as Suzanne said, the numbers are still quite small. Our workaround, as far as that is concerned, is to combine the results for Māori and Pacific people for, I think, the last three surveys. But even then, the numbers are still low. The important point is that this is a nationally representative sample of New Zealanders.
Yeah, kia ora for that, Emanuel. In terms of the questions too, this year, although we kept the question intent the same, we worked with the Ministry for Women, who provided some different perspectives on research questions, and Research New Zealand and us and the Ministry for Women workshopped those questions with a perspective on how are we framing this to avoid being heteronormative, avoid being binary gender, but at the same time we are looking for gender attitudes, and a lot of the gender attitudes are based around the binary gender. So the wording of it gets really tricky. The full report, well, or anyway, the questions are available for people who want to look at it. But we certainly put a lot of time and effort into making them as inclusive as we possibly could.
Thank you, Suzanne. A quick one on the data again. Was the sample randomized? I'm sorry, you may have covered that, Emanuel.
Yes. It's perfectly randomized.
Great. Thank you. Now, when do we consider equality has been achieved? The question was when a majority of women support that it has, or something else.
Oh, Karanina, well, what do you think? Throwing it over to you.
Well, when I stop worrying about my girls when they come home, we're not home at 10 o'clock, then perhaps then. I still think when you look at the gender breakdown, when you look at through education, health and welfare, the stats in terms of women's perception of what's been achieved or not is so low. We're only in the 30s, so we've got a long way to go. So, I mean, we've got to get those at least up to the 50 percentile before we can have any confidence that we're going to, reach it in our lifetime. But you have made progress in some areas if we compare the results of this one to 2017. So that's only a span of 5 years. So, let's be optimistic. And again, and if we now know where to target our limited resources, for example, targeting our young people who expect equity, who expect equality. If we I say we are at least a Human Rights Commission, if we focus on our young people, then I'm very optimistic, as opposed to trying to cover everybody. And then some people just won't change, but I'm very optimistic about our young people. I'm thinking about generations of our settler communities. I am a child of a family who came from Samoa. I am a settler person. My children are not. I've seen changes in New Zealand. I've been influenced also by the world around me, and understanding of rights and understanding of expectations that come. So I'm very hopeful that we'll achieve it. Whether we'll achieve it in our generation, I remain very hopeful, because I know that I've raised my children to expect to be treated equally and fairly, and to have a decent society. And our young people are so motivated, that they're powerful, they're marching for climate change, they're so in their power right now. I'm very hopeful for them.
Kia ora for that. We can all use hope. It's a wonderful thing. You talk about some of the differences, the trends that are increasing. It's quite cool. Answering one of the questions there, and which, when you focus on this year's results, we didn't go a lot into trends, but the full report does go into trends over the years. And one of the trend is the increasing acceptance of trans women and trans men in our society. And that is a significant difference, which, given the backlash that we've had in the last year or two, that is an important thing. But what we do with this data from here, there are some questions in the questions about, are we going to be comparing it to other surveys? Are we going to be putting out data stories like we did with the 2017? It certainly is our intention to work with people to do this. Once again, we're a charity reliant on donations to be able to fund what we do, and to the limited capacity of people who are volunteering to do this. But we would love to. It is fully our intention to be working with this data in the next year. We have now got 4 surveys. That's a lot of data that we can be working with, and we'd like to make the best use of it. So can I ask Kerry, do you think if there's anything else that needs to be addressed right now, or can we be?
I think we've answered almost all of them. There's just one question left, which was about advocacy points and takeaways from NCW and where people can find out more about that.
Main takeaways. So later on today, our key takeaways will be on the Gender Equal website. I encourage you to look there over the next few days. We will add the report documents, we will add links to the e-tool, we will add a recording of this event, so you'll be able to share it widely and go and check it out. So please do come back and check in the next few days for that. So it remains for me to just finish this off. Thank you very much, Emanuel and Karanina, for your input today, and to Jan Tinetti, who has had to leave us. Your presence has, and your kororo has made us richer and wiser, and we thank you very much for our whātai lava. Now, I would like to finish this with a karakia. Ka whakaeria te tapu, kia wātea ai te ara, kia tūru ki whakataha ai, kia tūru ki whakataha ai, haumie, huie, tai kie.
Tai kie.
So,
I love it, colleagues. Take care.
kia ora. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you, everybody. We are now finished. We will stop the recording, and it's been a pleasure having you with us.